So there's this RPG that my friends and I play. It's called Risus. Now, not many people have heard of it because most people, when they think tabletop RPG, they think Dungeons and Dragons, which I've tried multiple times to play, but is very complicated to those who are uninitiated and have maybe shorter attention spans. The topics of Dungeons and Dragons were always very interesting to me. I like fantasy, I like role-playing games. The issue is that the manual is pretty long and it's pretty hard to comprehend, you know, when you're working full-time and you have like an hour of free time a week, you know, and you want to see your friends and you want to teach them a new game, and they've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Risus is a good way to get people in. All you need is one six-sided die, and you can even just use your phone, type into Google, roll six-sided die. The Risus manual is about like 3 pages long. It's by this guy, S. John Ross. He is an incredible game maker. It's completely free. In the game, you could do whatever you want, but within the confines of what the game master decides, the GM. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's called a DM. But the game mechanics are very simple. But it's like pretend play as adults. You know, like when you're a kid, you know, you do these things like, I'm Batman, you're Superman, let's play. And as adults, you know, you don't do that. Maybe you do, that's awesome if you still do it. But it's harder to, because these kinds of tabletop role-playing, pen and paper role-playing games, the problem they solve is that they add this element of probability to whatever you do. And I think that Risus distills this idea that Dungeons & Dragons expands upon and develops an amazing system for, that helps you feel like your actions have consequence and your actions go through the filter of the GM, who is creating a world for you. It's kind of a game designer, a world designer. It's very interesting. I think that it's worth playing. You could play, it gets kind of hairy if you play over 6 players, but with 3 people, you're good to go. One person as GM and then 2 people as players. And if you always wanted to try Dungeons & Dragons, but you were intimidated by how much reading has to be done, but you've always wanted to try it, I think Risus is a great place to start. The PDF is like 3 pages long. Read it. Let me know what you think. You know, we've had great games. We've played games where the first game we played, we were in the setting, I was the GM, and we were in the setting of my friend's wedding. Everybody's characters were kind of inspired by lore that they were interested in, whether it be Star Wars or anime or video games. And we reenacted our friend's wedding, but as if they were all these characters. And what ended up happening, these bad guys show up who we incorporated as our friends, and they were also inspired by random lore, and they crashed the wedding and a lot of people died, and it was crazy and it was interesting. And to this day, my friends talk about this event as if it really happened. And we went ahead and for some reason we told our wives about this afterwards, because it feels like you live it. Because this element of probability that this dice and the way the mechanics of Risus work, or any role-playing game, is that the game feels very real, in so much as like a movie you just saw or a game you've just played, but all you're using is dice and talking. But for some reason, you know, when you choose to do an action like walk outside, the GM can say, oh, you've walked outside, and roll the dice to see if your step was successful, your step outside was successful. And if you roll a 1, the GM can tell you, well, you tripped and fell as soon as you walked outside and your leg is broken, you know, and then boom, right? So rather than say, oh, I want to do this and this and this. See, the problems with when kids play pretend is like, oh, I shot you, no, you shot me, I beat you, you're dead now, But see, with the GM, who's alive, who's dead, what did my action do? What did the world? Because the world is able to react to you. I think anybody could really be interested in this game, and I really hope that the game becomes more widespread. I hope more people try it. I hope people buy some of John Ross's products, just follow the website, go on and check out Risus. It means laughter in Latin. He says the game is just a beer and pretzels kind of RPG, and it really is. I mean, you can just hang out, or break out the rule book, the 3-page PDF, send it, text it to your friends, and say, let's play. And you guys could be Jedi or Goku or whatever, and doing Kamehamehas.
Aw, but it wasn't even close to what the turtle hermit did.
And blowing up planets or whatever. You could do anything in this game. You could relive anything. And let's say you're not like a creative person. The game has all these different, the community has created all these different campaigns. My best man is a zombie, or there's a bomb, someone's gotta defuse it. They detail out detailed campaigns. You feel worried that you wouldn't be creative enough to come up with your own ideas for worlds and stuff, and characters and who you should be. John Ross even came up with something called, his own campaign called The Toast of the Town. And I've read through it. It's very interesting. He actually wrote something called the Risus Companion, because even though the game's very simple, there's a lot of interesting things you could do with world building and designing your own campaigns and your own worlds. I really, really can't emphasize how much I recommend anybody who's ever heard of Dungeons & Dragons and been interested, because I'm one of those guys who's a very nerdy person, loves, PC, PlayStation, RPGs, Final Fantasies.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
Kingdom Hearts, and I have friends that love the Elder Scrolls type games and all that sort of thing. And I recommend that if you're that kind of nerd and you've never been properly exposed to the world of pen and paper RPGs, that you try this one out. It will only really take you and your friends maybe 10 minutes of your time. Try it out and see if you like it. And if you're looking for something more complex, maybe you could buy a Dungeons & Dragons set or something like that. But I think this particular RPG really lends itself to beginners and people who have never even played but always been interested in that sort of game. Personally, I find that the constraints of a board game or a video game are limited compared to Risus. We found ourselves playing Risus more than we were playing video games with each other, and talking about it and talking about the campaigns, the crazy campaigns that would happen, because your friends could do anything they want, but as the GM you could decide, no, don't do that, or oh, here's a punishment for doing this particular thing. It's like, imagine a video game where there's no invisible walls at the end of the ocean, like in certain games, or at the end, invisible walls that are because they haven't developed, the graphic designer, the level editor ended the level there. There's no end because the GM is the world. There's no limit to the amount of players or anything like that. So if you love video games, you love any other sort of RPG, never try Dungeons & Dragons, then I suggest to try Risus. If you played Dungeons & Dragons and found it too complicated, maybe try Risus. The only certain people might not like Risus who are diehard RPG type people, because it's kind of simple and straightforward, but I think that's what makes it so beautiful.